Hello guys, Omni here. So tonight marks the end, the finale, the wrap up of the entire series of Game of Thrones. And I know this season has already been completely divisive, and understandably so. Like, none of the reasons that people are getting upset do I really think are unwarranted, unless it's the people that didn't see Dany's fall. But that should have been expected. That's always what they were going for. Even George R.R. Martin said that's the path for a character in the books. It just, the path might be different, but the end result of her character arc seems to be the same in the books and as in the show. But how do we get there? Who knows? Could be different. Could be completely different. At least in the books, I'm sure it'll be shown a lot more and we'll have actual time for development. Because I think that's really the biggest fault that these last two seasons have, and then that they are extremely rushed, that all the story beats are there, but it's like a bullet points of these story beats rather than actually seeing the follow through and the journey to these conclusions and these character decisions. Having expected most of this since the last couple of seasons for a long time now, kind of feeling like this was the route everything was going to go. The turns didn't quite shock me as much as like they would have. The way the Night King wrapped up, I think, was the only thing that I think completely threw me for a loop on how they were going to get out of that one. But everything else this season, I've pretty much had in my mind. And before we get too far into it, I've enjoyed this season. It hasn't really, it's not perfect. It could have been way better and could have benefited by having a full season, but I feel like the fact that Benioff and Weiss have signed on for this Star Wars deal, they've just, because HBO, as far as I have heard, offered to give them full seasons for both these last two, but they're nah, we don't need it. We don't need a full 2 seasons worth of 10 episodes. We can finish this in 7 and 6. And that the show suffered for that, and I really think it's just because they want to get it, want to get it finished and get it over with, so they can get on to Star Wars and make that big Disney money. Still, I don't think there's like a fault in the story. I don't think this completely ruins Game of Thrones. It's just another series that may have a lackluster or disappointing ending for some. For me, I still enjoy it. If I have to rate the show as a whole, I would have to say, to me personally, it's still an 8.5. There's only one show out there that I would give a 10, and Game of Thrones would have had a 10 if it wasn't for how rushed these last two seasons have been. And that number 10 for me is Breaking Bad. Like, as I find Game of Thrones much more entertaining, but Breaking Bad through and through never really lost its roots and kept to its guns throughout and knew when it needed to end and how far it needed to take things. And if it isn't obvious at this point, there will be spoilers if you haven't watched tonight's episode, the series finale of Game of Thrones. Tune out now and tune back in once you have. For this though, we pick up the episode right after the battle, Tyrion and Jon treading through the ashes of the burning Winterfell. And, it's very obvious where people are feeling on this point, especially Jon and Tyrion coming across Grey Worm, executing some captured and surrendered soldiers, as in his words, on the orders of the Queen. This upsets Jon even more, so he goes off to find Daenerys. Tyrion takes off on his own to kind of like mourn and wallow in his sorrow for how he's allowed this all to transpire, and he wasn't able to prevent it. And he goes down to the dragon, the dungeons, to see if there's any clues or evidence that Jaime and Cersei might have got out, like their plan had alluded to. But unfortunately, he makes his way down there and he finds a pile of rubble with Jaime's golden hand sticking out, and he uncovers the dead bodies of both his brother and sister. But if you look at the dungeon, the weird thing to point out is if they were maybe 10 to 15 feet in almost any other direction, they would have missed any of that rubble and been fine, which kind of sucks, kind of funny all at the same time. But, whatever. Dany at the top of the steps leading up to the throne is giving a grand old speech to her armies in Valyrian and Dothraki. So Jon's not able to make out a whole lot except for a key word that's Winterfell. And her speech pretty much tells us that, you know, King's Landing is not the end for Dany. She will not stop. Her armies will not stop until every continent and kingdom across the globe of however large this planet is will be free. She wants to not only stop at Essos and Westeros, but to move on to every other continent and liberate all the people of the world and not just stop at these two countries. And, you know, this puts a couple people at ease, namely Jon, because she directly called out Winterfell, and Tyrion makes it up just in time to hear the end of her speech to toss down his hand medallion, and basically he's like, you betrayed me. I was like, yeah, well, you cruelly murdered and burned an entire city of innocents and children. And so she takes him away. And in his confinement, Jon pays him a visit, and they have a long conversation about Dany's mindset. How they make a clear note to show how she's garnered her power. It's always been at the result of bloodshed and this belief in her own destiny, to the point where if you were someone who really truly believed you were that good and that you could bring this pure dream of a fantasy to life of a perfect world, wouldn't you execute anybody in the way that would prevent you from making that perfect world? And that's very true. She's done this time and time again throughout all of these seasons, that anybody that was in her way would meet fire and blood. That has never changed. It's just, it's come down to people that we're not rooting for once. And it sets in this doubt for him. For Jon, he's put some doubt into Jon, which Jon's already feeling a lot of that guilt and doubt in her actions after she burned the city and on the order she's given her Unsullied. And Tyrion continues to even like, you know, Sansa's not going to stand for this. You know, they're not going to do that. Why do you think she told me the truth about you? She wanted to cripple Dany's rule. And, you know, this puts his family in danger as well. And she's already passively threatened them multiple times up until now. Dany finds the throne room, and there's this nice moment where she's like, wow, she's like touching the throne. She finally sees it. She finally gets it in her reach. And then Jon confronts her, which is funny because going in there, because after the burning of the city, it was unclear if it was ash or snow, and it seems to be a mix of both. It's actually snowing and raining ash in King's Landing now. And it's weird, how long has Dany been in that in the throne room? Because Drogon was keeping guard outside and lets Jon pass, but he was in a mound of snow. He was completely covered in snow, just laying there sleeping, I guess. How long was he laying there? Curious. This is something that crossed my mind. But Jon goes in there and sees her at the throne. They share some exchanges about how they started and where they are now. And he barks off at her on how merciless she was in her attack on this kingdom. And he shocks her and he rocks her to the core on it. And he asks her for mercy for the people that are still here and still alive. Mercy for Tyrion, that a world, for this world to continue and grow, it has to be built on mercy. And she does not budge on that point. She will take out anybody that stands in her way to this vision of the world for her. And it's really a poor choice of words on her part that really, really set in for Jon what he has to do. Because she's like, me and you both know what is good. And he's like, well, what about the people who think they know what is good? And she says, they won't have a choice. We make that choice for them. And their version of good is above anybody else's. And it's that line that solidifies what Jon has to do. And an embrace, a kissing, loving embrace of him telling her, you will always be my queen, stabs her in the heart and kills her. I'm not going to lie, and this will probably aggravate a lot of people, but I woohooed when that happened. and it excited me. It was great. It was like, finally, something I called happened. And it was just really rewarding. Drogon senses this from outside and comes into the keep. And, because of Jon's Targaryen blood, he doesn't do anything to Jon, but he is clearly upset. His whines, the sounds he's making are just so sad to see. And in his anger, he just starts blowing flames in rage, and then targets the throne itself and melts it to nothing. After that, he looks at Jon, takes Dany's body, and just flies off. And that's the last we see of Dany and Drogon for the rest of the episode. It's crazy. It's hilarious. It's awesome all at the same time, and sad. I'm just really curious on where he's taking her also. After this, I guess it's assumed that Jon turns himself in for killing Dany, because we don't see anybody actually apprehend him or find him. Which turning himself in seems like a very Jon thing to do. Because I feel like if Grey Worm had been the one that just found him, Grey Worm would have just ended him. That's my thought on it. But we cut to Tyrion in a cell being taken out by Grey Worm to meet a council of all the VIPs, actually all the current lords and living VIPs of Westeros. Key players, pretty much most of the main characters. We get a couple of faces that I don't really recognize. Edmure finally makes a resurgence since he was freed by Jaime at Riverrun, or the twins. I can't remember. Wherever Jaime freed him from the Freys. And great little bit there. But they talk about the succession of the throne and what to do now that the queen's dead. Yara is there and upset because she swore to and promised to follow Dany. Tyrion's in chains, and everybody's trying to decide how to proceed because they don't have a king. So they try to decide on who should be the next king by kind of taking a vote. And, a lot of people were kind of talking about, well, myself and my group as well was talking about maybe they'll establish a republic or some kind of like democracy going forward. And Sam makes this suggestion kind of in a way, I guess, to like, echo that same feeling of the fandom as well. And, everybody just laughs at him, and that's instantly shot down. But they do decide that among themselves, among the lords of Westeros, a king will not be chosen by their blood. No more. They will be chosen by a vote and a committee of the lords of Westeros, whoever they think would best suit the needs of the realm. And it's an arousing and very convincing speech by Tyrion. He suggests Bran. Bran doesn't want the throne. Bran's duty is to the realm. His brain and his mind holds the history of all of Westeros, of all of the world in general. He knows the history. He knows all the patterns and the sources of all of the blight in the country from its beginnings to its present. And who better than the Three-Eyed Raven, who knows more than anybody the history of the world and how it works, and what things have been done wrong, what things have been done right, and how to implement those going forward. And it's weird because Bran not only accepts, but he's like, why do you think I came? Like, this was all part of his chessboard plan. Like, he feels like he's been Doctor Stranging all these things. Like, that this was his end goal, or he knew this was where he would end up ahead of time. And he had only been saying the things he had been saying up until this point to steer people where they needed to be in order for everything to play out right. Now, does that mean he's manipulated everybody so that he would be on the throne? Or is this the event that truly is best for Westeros, and that is what he put into motion? He doesn't want it. No, I don't believe he did. But I do think that he knew this is how things needed to be to move forward. One thing that this poses to me as well is, I think, does this mean that each king that succeeds him will then become the Three-Eyed Raven? Because he would have to pass that on as well, pass on that mantle. And that would make it even that would make even more sense for someone worthy to move on to be instilled with those gifts and that knowledge and that wisdom. And this could ensure like a pure rule going forward, unless he chooses a really bad three-eyed raven to succeed him. But then again, it's not his choice, it's group choice. We get to see a lot of people too that we haven't seen. We get the faceless man of Dorne, the new prince of Dorne, shows up here. He gets like one line. Young Robin Arryn is here, and he's not so young anymore, and that's pretty hilarious to see, and interesting as well. I love that Edmure shows back up. That's really great. At the end of this all, Sansa comes down to Sansa's vote, and she's like, "I'll vote for you, but the North will not be part of the Seven Kingdoms. It will be independent as it had been for thousands of years before the Targaryens showed up and forced us to submit." Which he agrees. But I think that's also funny because Yara had a deal with Daenerys that the Iron Islands would be its own independent kingdom as well, but then doesn't complain about Sansa getting that and not her. But whatever, who cares? It's the Iron Islands. It's just a puddle of just a couple of rocks that mean nothing. As a result of this, as his punishment and his repentance, Bran names Tyrion his hand, and Tyrion doesn't want it. He's made too many mistakes. He doesn't want that responsibility, doesn't feel that he deserves it, and that's why Bran chooses him. He feels like he needs to serve the rest of his life as Hand of the King to repent for all of the mistakes he's made, and he's going to spend his life in service fixing those mistakes. Poetic enough, fine. Jon, the only way that he could come ahead for killing the queen without killing him or executing him or whatever was to, in pure great fashion, something we called to, was that Jon ends up in the North. They send him right back to the Night's Watch to renounce his name, his titles, father no children. So the Targaryen line ends with him. He will be the last and final Targaryen, living out his days above the wall where he is meant to be, the place where he wanted to be all of this time. And it fits. It's good for him as well. We get Grey Worm selling off with his Unsullied to Noth to pay respects to Missandei, which is fitting. Jon says his goodbyes to the Starks and, acknowledges. Jon shows up before Jon leaves for the North. He says his goodbye to Sansa, Arya, and Bran. And we learn that Arya is not going back to Winterfell and that she wouldn't be paying him any visits at the Wall because she's going to go explore the world. She's going to go find out what is west of Westeros. No one knows. It's where all the maps end. So she's going to become a globe-trotting adventurer, and that's fitting for her character. She's not somebody that's really meant to stay in one spot, not anymore. We cut to the new council of the king, the new king's council. We have Davos as the master of ships, Bronn the master of coin, Brienne as the head of the king's guard, Sam is the grand maester of King's Landing. And they acknowledge this, but I don't feel like why they're needed at this point anymore, except for Master of Laws. There's 3 vacancies still that they acknowledge: Master of War, Master of Whispers, and Master of Laws. Bran's a 3-eyed raven. They straight up do not need a Master of Whispers. Not at all. Not one bit. He can, if anybody's sneaking around doing anything, he can just be like, whoa, and know it. Like, he can tell if Francine, the cook, is poisoning his meal because he can just and know it and be like, hey, Kingsguard, go arrest that woman. We also see that Podrick is now part of the Kingsguard, which is really awesome. Sam also drops off Maester Ebrus's book, which has now been renamed from that god-awful name that he had, which I can't even remember, but it's been renamed and titled A Song of Ice and Fire. And what we had predicted a long time ago, that's how this would end, in some way, that would be the book. Tyrion, there's this little joke that Tyrion makes. It's like, I'm sure I received some heavy criticism in this book, kind of a nod to the audience. But they say he's not even mentioned in the book, which is just wrong. Bran shows up for the meeting, says his hellos to everybody, his council. He asks if last place Drogon has been sighted. Sam says it's east, and he was like, I'll go see if I can fight him, I guess, with his warg powers, and leaves the rest of the small stuff to the council in true king fashion, and is wheeled away. Jon arrives at the north, meets Tormund. There's a nice little montage that shows all of the Starks, where they are and where they're going. With Sansa being crowned Queen of the North, Arya setting sail to go on her adventure, and Jon meeting up with Tormund, petting Ghost, and then riding off into the great true North with all of the wildlings, and that is when we fade to black. I know pretty much anybody who is a fan of Dany and that character, I completely get why you're upset. Because if you didn't see any of the signs, or if you didn't want to believe any of the signs that she would overcome her destiny and the foreshadowing that's been there since season 1, then I get it. I feel it. But that's her character arc. That's where she was always going. Even in George R.R. Martin's books, he said this is her destination. It just might be a different path to get to it. So if you're like, well, we'll see how the books are going to do it. Well, she's still going to be evil in the books. Not evil, but she's definitely she's going to have that tragic fall. She's going to have that Anakin Skywalker storyline, except unlike Anakin, she doesn't get redeemed. I think in every other way, despite how rocky and long how rocky and short this season was at getting from point A to point B to point C, throughout this season, knocking out all the story notes that they needed to in these last couple of episodes, that despite how inconsistent and rushed it was, this was my perfect ending. I had entertained the thought that Bran would end up on the throne because it makes the most sense, because he's the three-eyed raven. He knows the history of Westeros. He knows every action any king has ever made, both good and bad. Who would know better than him that what to do going forward and how to lead the world into a better, brighter future. I had initially thought that maybe it would come down to Sansa, because truly she's the most intelligent character on the show at this point, even more so than Tyrion. But no, that wouldn't fit her arc in this as well, where her place is in the north with her family and her people. And that's where she goes. She's queen in the north. She gets to still be queen of the people that she wants to be in charge of, the people that she actually cares about. And that's fitting. Arya's arc, fitting. Everybody ends up in a spot where I feel like this is where they should have been. This is how they always should have ended. And, people were talking about, I've been seeing people mention all that, Jon's lineage ended up meaning nothing. And, that's the thing. It never mattered to Jon. It never mattered really to anybody except for the people that it mattered to. Like, it comes down to that same riddle. People put power where they believe power resides. Jon didn't want that power. He didn't want anything to do with it. That's always been his arc. That didn't ever change him, really. He just wanted to be alone, nothing, have a peaceful life, and that's what he gets. But what it did was set him up for this arc in the eyes of other people, because that never changed how he thought of himself. It changed how everybody else thought of him. And that put him in a spot that put him at odds with the person he cared for, because that 100%, his lineage posed a direct threat to her. And I feel like that was his purpose. He united the world against the Night King, fulfilling that. He didn't get the killing blow, but it was his actions that made it possible for them to even have a chance to take him out. His arc was to get to Dany, and because of his bloodline, it put him in that position that saved Westeros from possibly an even worse tyrant, another mad queen, another tyrannical rule that would threaten and continue on through the worlds of this planet that they live on, not just Westeros, but beyond. And it did matter. It just didn't matter in the way that we thought. It didn't end with him on the throne. It just ended with him in a point in which he got to not only save everybody, but he got to do the right thing and get a punishment that is also the life he really wants. That's really what it comes down to. Is it the most satisfying thing for everybody? Probably not. I'm sure a lot of people wanted to either see him die in this episode or see him on the throne. I know I probably would have loved to see him on the throne as well, but that's not how the show was going to end. Like I said, I never thought we would ever see Danny or John on the throne by the end of the show. And now there's no throne. I feel like, aside from everything up to this point in this season, that this episode 100% met all the marks for me. I was not disappointed at all in this episode by anything that came up. Nothing in this episode upset me at all. I am, even like the brand thing. I entertained the idea, but that's not something I thought they would commit to. And just how it played out and how everything worked out, I was like, you're right. This makes so much sense. And this is a satisfying ending for all of our surviving characters. Like I said, the only people that I can't see being happy are the people who are Grey Worm fans or Daenerys fans, that they were really, really rooting for Dany despite all of her negative traits, especially being amplified and multiplied in this last season. So I definitely get that. This is going to be a divisive thing. I've already seen a lot of people saying I'm trying to erase this series from my mind because they're that dissatisfied with this season. And I don't know how much I agree with that. I don't think this season, despite its flaws, in any way ruins everything that's been coming up to this point. I don't. Is it as satisfying as it could have been? Probably not. I still think last season and this season should have both been 10 episodes. And it's completely not on HBO. It's on 100% Benioff and Weiss for rushing this. HBO offered them 20 episodes for these last 2 seasons, and they decided that this was the amount they needed to do. And I honestly think it's just so that they can be done with it. I don't think they told a bad story. I don't think they did wrong by the story. I do think that they didn't give it what it deserved, though. And that was more time and more room to breathe with these characters and follow them across these plot points. These because this last season has just kind of been a checklist and a bullet points rather than like a coherent flowing narrative. And that's especially why I think it's suffering a lot in the eyes of a lot of people. I get it. I do. For me, I love the series so much. I can see past it. It sucks. It's not what I wanted, but it's what we have. It's the story that's been told. And it didn't end in an unsatisfying way for me. I always said that I'm going to reserve my judgments until the final episode was out. And if I'm not satisfied by the end of this final episode, then sure, it might tarnish the series for me. I've had many a season or many other series be kind of ruined by an extended or final season. X-Files was one of the best shows in the world to me, and when they revived it, they completely ran it into the ground with the retcons and everything like that. And it's, looking back, I can't watch the old show and not know where it now goes. Otherwise, I got to be that guy that's like, that's not my X-Files. I'm not going to count season 10 and 11 as canon. I don't want to be that guy. It just sours everything, and I don't feel like this season soured the entire show for me. I'm going to go back and rewatch all of it because I feel like part of it being sometimes things flow differently when you have to wait week to week for each episode, and there's like an expectation and anxiety in a way. What are they going to do? What's going to happen? Oh my goodness. And I feel like once it's over with, you can go back, rewatch everything, and it adds a completely different tone and narrative flow to everything. So I'm gonna do that and see if that influences my opinion on it at all or changes it. So that'll be something that I'm curious to check out and try to do. And I recommend that to anybody else that didn't like this season. Go back. I would say at least maybe season 4 is a good starting point, because that's where everything really starts to shift away from the politics and in towards this big grand journey towards the end. But yeah, I want to know what you guys think. I don't really know what else I can really add to all this. I feel like everything that happened in this episode had been clearly foreshadowed. John got to pet Ghost. I'm so glad that they saved their budget enough for him to be a douche in another episode just so he can at least pet the dog in the last episode. I'm glad they saved enough budget to have Ghost show up in this last episode and get some freaking love from John, like real love. I'm sad that Drogon, Rhaegal, and Ghost never got to be in a scene together. That would have been awesome. I really wish John would have had a moment where he had his direwolf and his dragon. But at least he gets to be live out in the true nature of his Stark blood now, and the way that he was raised, and in the free North. I'm curious if he's going to become Lord Commander again. That'd be pretty interesting if he just went back up there into his exile, into his punishment, and just went right back to being Lord Commander. I'm sure he would. I'm sure he will. It will be Lord Commander again. Or who knows? Maybe they'll just let him live beyond the wall. I don't know. I feel like that he would prefer just living with Tormund and the wildlings beyond the wall. I think that would be the life he would want to live. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pass this off to you guys. I've been talking about this for a long time now. I know I recapped pretty much this entire episode, but I feel like it needed to be for this one. It's the last episode of this show, the series. I think we're supposed to get the pilot episode some summer of next year for the first spinoff, which takes place thousands of years before the events of this show, surrounding the children of the forest, the first men, and maybe even the creation of the White Walkers. I don't know really why it would be important to expand on that, since it was kind of disappointing how that whole arc ended. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kinds of spin-offs that they come up with, because I really wanted to stay in this world and revisit it, even though this story with our characters might continue be over for now. I would like to see a spin-off show, the adventures of the wild adventures of Arya on the high seas, traveling the world. It could be like a monster of the week, where are we visiting this week kind of thing, seeing all the different like worlds beyond Westeros and Essos. That would be really interesting. But yeah, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I'm sure a lot of people are going to disagree with me, for sure. So regardless, I want to know how you guys felt. I want to know what you guys would have changed, what you did or didn't like about this episode. Leave those in the comments below, and we'll have a conversation in the comments after the video. I love carrying on this narrative with you guys and sharing our thoughts and views and continuing on beyond the video itself. And guys, if you like this, please watch my other videos. I'll link a couple of these at the end. I've covered every episode of this season. And yeah, it's the end of an era. It might not be the end you wanted, but it's over. And it's I'm already starting to feel that void. It's always a depressing moment when a show you love comes to a complete end, and you know that you probably won't ever see these characters again. But I do hope and look forward to seeing all of these actors in new and exciting different roles, to see where all their careers go from here. For a lot of people, this was their first acting job, and I'm really curious to see where they go. And I'll follow that journey too. I think there's not an actor in this series that I really didn't fall for. And I really want to keep following them and supporting them going forward, unless something really stupid happens, but I doubt that. But yeah, that's it for today, guys. I'm not sure what we'll be doing next, what the next reaction is going to be, the next review that's going to be. But keep an eye out on the channel. If you like this, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you guys so much for being here and supporting the channel, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Take care.